Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
There he was, after 24 years in the military, minding his own business, when suddenly he started hearing whispers from the other side. Whispers that changed the course of his life. Stay tuned for Dean's story. Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to explore the other side is Dean McMurray, the military medium. Dean is an internationally acclaimed psychic medium, healer, dowser, and ordained minister. After 24 years of service, he retired from the Army and enlisted in a new service. He devoted his life to developing his psychic abilities in service to others. Today, Dean conducts readings for clients throughout the world, teaches mediumship classes, presents at regional symposiums, conferences, and workshops. His website, themilitarymedium.com. Dean, thank you so much for joining us with Mission Evolution.
Thanks for having me.
So, what was your job while you were serving in the military?
Well, I wore a lot of hats, but when I first started, it was, I was, if anybody is familiar with with the Army, I was in the infantry. So if you think of, ground combat tactics and paratrooper tactics, things that nature.
Frontline kind of stuff.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
So during your time of military service, did you ever have any indication you were psychic?
Not that I was aware of, and it wasn't until many years after my awakening and was well on my spiritual journey that, I did the reflection and I kind of looked back and asked myself that very same question. Was I aware? And the simple answer is no, not at the time. However, looking back, I noticed or remembered some incidences while I was serving that made me go, there was something bigger at play and something bigger than myself.
Could you briefly share one of those incidents?
Yeah, absolutely. One incident that comes to mind when we were in Afghanistan, and this was in the early 2000s, and we were on a up-armored vehicle convoy into a known Taliban area, and during the nighttime, and so everybody's attention is heightened, and one of the we had, for some odd reason, we had stopped, and which is typically a no-no. You don't do that unless it's absolutely necessary, and we were there for more than a minute. And so what I got on the radio trying to, hey, what's going on, and nobody was responding. And from behind me in the vehicle, which there was nobody physically there, I kept on hearing, you need to move the vehicles up another 500 meters. Now, this voice kept insistently, encouraging me to get these vehicles another 500 meters up the road or up the trail. And I finally, and nobody was answering the radio, and finally I had to get out of the vehicle and sprint forward on foot with all your gear and body armor and everything else. And here, for some strange reason, and I'll probably still never know, but they thought it was a great time to take a smoke break and a bathroom break. And I was like, have you guys lost your mind? What's going on? And about the same time we were having this discussion, we heard a audible clicking noise. And, to kind of paint the scenario for everybody, to my right was kind of almost a sheer cliff, and to my left was more of a, you know, like a kind of a higher choke point area that you could overlook. Somebody could be above you, and and we just knew it wasn't a good area. But when we heard this clicking, we were like, "What the heck is that?" And we still believe to this day that that was a IED trying to be detonated remotely, and we were carrying technology at the time early in its development that helped, protected us, and we still believe that's a reason that we're here. But I go back to going, where did that voice come from? Where was that insistent voice of? And again, there was myself, the driver, and then we had a gunner with us, and the gunner stood up through a hatch in the vehicle, and so there was nobody physically sitting behind me in any of the back seats. And those vehicles are, normally very loud anyways. And I'm like, wow, where did that voice come from? Who, what was that trying to keep us safe? And, I can explain technology, but at the time I couldn't explain that. And so that just kind of makes me, kind of going, yeah, I had my guardian angels with me that day. We were being looked out by something more.
What was the voice like? Did you feel like you were literally hearing it?
Oh, absolutely. It was as if I still remember like it was yesterday. It was like somebody literally, if somebody physically was sitting behind you, and if they were to tell you, you need to move the vehicles up another 500 meters, just like you're hearing my voice right now. Exactly that. There was no whispering. It was just a matter of fact. You need to move the vehicles up another 500 meters. And I
So
was like, oh, go ahead.
it sounds like your gift is fairly audio sentient, yes?
It's a mixture. So the clairaudience is one of my abilities, but the clairsentience aspect, yes. And then, a mixture of claircognizance and a bunch more, but they seem to merge and change with the situation. So it's certainly metamorphosized over the years.
So when you were young, like a child, can you remember having any experiences at that time? I know a lot of people tend to be a little more sensitive as children.
Right. Well, according to my mom, after I came out as a medium, my mom
I love
just,
that came out.
yeah, I came out, and obviously we're not doing video, but I always do the air quotes and say, quote unquote, came out of the closet as a medium. And when I came out as a medium, my mom just kind of looked at me and goes, well, that totally makes sense. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? And here she, vividly remembers me as a young child having, these imaginary friends that I would play with, and just very intuitive. And here my mother, once I embraced who I was and was very open as a medium, it made it okay. What I found out, I have to laugh sometimes, because it made it okay for my own family to come out about their own abilities. Here, my mother is extremely uber intuitive. My sister is I have a sister that's crazy clairaudient. I have another sister that is, just crazy clairsentient being. So, and it runs in the family. And I know that, my dad, before he passed, he has family in Calgary, and they talked about an aunt growing up in Saskatchewan, and talking about where she would do readings with tea leaves. And I was
Oh,
like,
goodness.
this,
Yeah.
and it just kind of makes you sit back and go, wow, these things sometimes aren't talked about, and how it ran in the family and I wasn't even aware of it. And here I just kind of stepped into this reawakening, remembering who I am. And
So were you the youngest?
yes, I'm the youngest of four. Mhm.
Right, I wondered because sometimes they're the last to know. You know what I'm trying to say?
Well,
Yeah.
even I did ask that question because it did intrigue me. And I even asked my mom, was this something that, was ever talked about? And she goes, no, I have no, other than you children, obviously being the mother um, but she said within the family dynamic, that wasn't talked about. She said, I didn't know about Dad's on. And that only came about because he was talking to one of his sisters about what I was doing. I guess they were catching up with current events and at the time. And she said, oh, that's nothing. Don't you remember Aunt so and so? And, she used to read tea leaves. And it's like, whoa, where did... so these conversations we have and making it okay, especially in today's age, and I know there's families and situations that still is not safe for them to open up to who they truly are.
But I think
However,
I think there's being more openness now, don't you think? I mean, with
oh,
the New Age movement,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know for a fact, over the last 13, 14 years that I've been working with clients, I have still ran into people that are like, I am very fearful about coming about with my gifts because I know that my family or my children or whatever you put the word in there, fill in the blank, would have me admitted. They would have me committed to the local psychiatry hospital or whatever, have me on medication. And even though I'm not a psychiatrist, but the thing that I would share is I know for a fact that there are so many misdiagnosed people that are dealing with something more than a psychosis event. And what's really funny is since I've been on this journey of mediumship, I have actually had psychologists and counselors refer people to me
Oh, amazing.
and
Well,
they
Dean,
said because I can't help them.
it's that magic moment. We need to take a station break. We'll pick up with this on the other side, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
I stand now.
Are you a psychic medium or having audio hallucinations? With us this hour discussing psychic mediumship is Dean McMurray. His website, themilitarymedium.com. Dean, how did you feel about, did you start doubting your sanity when you suddenly realized, indeed I am hearing voices here?
Yeah, well, 100% because I think you alluded to it earlier that I wasn't open to being a medium when all this first started happening. And quite honestly, I wasn't looking to be a medium, minding my own business, getting ready to retire from the military, having two small children at home, and I wasn't looking at taking this route in life, but alas, that was what the universe had in store for me.
So once you discovered that you were indeed psychic instead of insane,
Right.
did you get any formal training?
I did. Oddly enough, there was a gentleman that was living in our area that had moved, and he was teaching mediumship classes. And my wife suggested that I, see if I connect with him or his work, and I did. And so I ended up taking a course in mediumship just to learn more about it and how I connect with it and how it works with me. And one of the best things that I learned from that is he goes, Dean, You can take all the training you want in the world, but you need to take time not only to refine your ability, but how and learn intimately how the ability works with you. Because he goes, every medium is different, and everybody does the mediumship differently. So you need to refine that in your own unique way, and just go and take time and play with it.
I understand that you give mediumship classes. How do you help people find their own way?
That's a great question. First off, I always say my class is not the way, it's a way. Because I think so many times we get wrapped up into this is the end all be all, course, or and people get too vested in that. But we start with more almost outside of mediumship and find out how they're receiving their messages. Individuals might be, they might get it through audio, or maybe they're more of a feeler, or maybe they can, taste things, maybe they can see things. So we talk about the clairs, and we talk about what some of these abilities are and how it's working for them. And then we start on baby steps, and everything in my course, at least, is designed to build upon itself. And but I always use the analogy of a Pilates class, though, and saying if you're just going to take one Pilates class, it's not going to do you any good. You're going to be sore as heck the next day, and you're just going to hate it. And so you got to continue going back to class. You got to continue going, working out on your own. And meaning, if you're going to do mediumship, go take a class that you resonate with. But guess what? Then you need to go and practice mediumship on your own and build that muscle.
Gotcha. So, you started out by hearing a guiding spirit, for lack of anything better to say. But how did you then transition into being a medium? I mean, those are kind of different.
They are. And so, thinking about that moment back in Afghanistan, that was kind of a flash in the pan at that moment. And because when I returned from Afghanistan, I transitioned into a different mode of military duty, we'll call it. And so I started focusing on the next part of my life for the next 10 years. And it wasn't until, uh, that I was deployed to the lovely country of Kosovo for a year. And when I came back, that's when my deceased grandmother came to visit me. And this whole time, I, did not believe in any of that stuff. Remember that brief moment I had back in Afghanistan. I had long forgotten that. That was tucked away in a journal somewhere, and because I had written about it, because I thought it was very odd, but I forgot about it because I wanted to put that chapter to bed. And hey, I'm moving on with bigger and better things. But when my deceased grandmother came to visit me around the same time, there was a lot of paranormal activity going on in our home. And by this time, I'm married. I have a 5-year-old daughter. And when I came back from deployment, we had a newborn son. And so we had a very bustling young household. And here I am getting ready to retire from the military with 3 years left. And I'm thinking, holy cow, Dad doesn't have time to have a mental breakdown. And I kind of went back to, this was before I took the mediumship class of, why me, why now? And, a psychic had told me that she was like, Dean, you're a medium. And I said, you're full of you know what? And she said, I probably am. However, that doesn't make you any less a medium. And so I wanted to know what that meant for Dean McMurray, because I still consider myself today a small town kid from northern Minnesota that is really nobody special, in the sense of hey, I just went on and did what a lot of people do and serve in the military and start a family, and the story goes on. However, mine took a bit of a odd turn.
That it did. So would you mind going back a little? And you said there was
Yes.
paranormal things going on in your house. What was
Yes.
going on?
So before my grandmother, right after the birth of my son, and I just returned from deployment, as I shared. We started having clocks and pictures fly at the wall. And at first, I thought it was just, hey, I didn't put the nail in the, in the dry or in the, into the stud or use a drywall anchor. Those kind of logical. I was trying to put logic to something that defies logic. And um, 9 times out of 10, it was not making sense. I was like, well, why did that fall off the wall? And when I would literally watch something not just rattle and I got to share is there was a train where we were living at the time. There was a train that would come through every once in a while. But I was like, that doesn't just fall that or get thrown. It's almost like somebody had their hand behind it that would give it a toss.
So did
And
you
oh, go ahead.
consider that to be spirits ultimately, or
Oh,
poltergeist activity?
well, the ultimate definition of poltergeist is German for noisy ghost, right? Well, they were doing a great thing. They were being noisy for sure, but it was nothing negative. It was more, hey Dean, get your collective, what together. We need to get your attention because we were so busy back in those years. And my wife was working corporate America. She was, in management. And so we had 2 small kids, and we were super, super busy. And so to get my attention, it needed to be something dramatic. And so it was spirit trying to, give this poltergeist, we'll call it, activity. And I've referred it to in the past as poltergeist. But the thing was, it was never anything negative. And then one evening while I was washing bottles and everybody else was in bed, my deceased grandmother, who passed back in the 80s, showed up. Now, she didn't physically manifest for me, but I could feel her with every ounce of my being. And I just knew it was that claircognizant, that clear knowing that it was grandma.
Now, were you close to this grandmother when
I,
she was alive?
I was, yes. She used to watch me after kindergarten and all those grandmotherly
Things,
things. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So was she also gifted in this arena?
I wouldn't doubt it. I never did ask, and maybe that's a great question to ask my mom now, but I don't know. I wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me though if she was gifted,
So when you're speaking to the dead, oh joy, right?
right?
Um, how do they tend to present themselves to you now?
Well, they present themselves in a manner of ways. So, I've had people show up in the manner of the day that they died. So, if you think of somebody that was dying from cancer, and really it's more about the evidential aspect, right? Because the reading is not about me. It never was. It's for the individual I'm giving the reading to. So all I have to do is describe to them how I'm seeing them. And just like I would describe you or Rob or anybody else, is that how I see a picture or a video or whatever presents itself to me. And so that way, then they're like, oh, yep, that's Grandpa Joe. Unfortunately, he passed from cancer. And in the later days, it was really hard to watch him. Essentially, if somebody's passed from cancer, different things, there's a bunch of different evidential aspects of very gaunt, or it could be somebody was very heavy when they passed, or sometimes they will, not that it's very nice to look at or even talk about, but um, they might show a lot of trauma to their body. And I'm supposed to talk about that in the way they pass, because it's evidential information, so they can validate that it was whomever, it was their loved one.
We're just about to go into a commercial break here, but do you think that you're reading from the person that's hired you from their field?
Oh, you mean their auric field, their energy field?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, I pick up on the energy about the client themselves from their field, but not about spirit.
Gotcha. So we are going to have to go into that break. Dean and I will be right back to continue this discussion, so you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
One people, one nation, searching through the night. One people, one nation, searching for the light. Pila Maya yellow, Pila Maya yellow, Pila Maya yellow.
Do you see ghosts? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing Communing with the Dead is Dean McMurray. His website, themilitarymedium.com. Dean, I've heard that, a lot of people will see something paranormal, but because it's not in their vocabulary, we'll write it off to something else. What are the signs that you're seeing ghosts or hearing advice from the other side?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that, to discern for yourself. And a lot of people say, well, how do you do that? And I would say is, instead of listening with your logical brain, is what does it feel to you? If it's something that is outside or defying logic, saying there's nobody here, why am I hearing this? Then, there's the aspect of, I would trust that, there's something paranormal going on. Some other things that happen is, is there a mist, or is there different manifestations going on? Do you feel a temperature difference as far as sometimes people report the room turning absolutely frigid, or energy spike, or sometimes it feels very moist or misty in a sense. And then another thing that can happen too is, if you all out of us, out of the blue, all of a sudden you smell, say, smoke, or different things, like somebody's smoking right next to you. I'm not talking about like electronics getting too hot, but talking about, boy, that smells just like stinky cigars or cigarettes, or it could be, a aunt or a grandma's or even mom's perfume that they always wore, maybe flowers, different things that cue you in on going, okay, there's something more here. And then I know a lot of, there are reports as well as where people will be touched, or, different physical phenomena that people experience.
So it can come in any way, and I would
Absolutely.
think that, given in our society we don't acknowledge this for the most part, it can slide by. If a person's really starting to feel like maybe there's something going on, they've had a couple of wake up calls,
Yeah.
what would you suggest to them would be the first step?
Well, first and foremost, if you're thinking that it's, the paranormal event or connecting with spirits, ask for a sign saying, okay, I think this is, we'll just say grandma or grandpa, is that you? And then, if it is you, or, you know, um, say, send me, and I always use the example of a blue butterfly, and or maybe something that you typically don't see. And that's one of the things that was suggested to me is, Dean, find something that you typically never see. And one time I asked for ninja throwing stars, of all things, and then it just came out of the blue. Of it was a book cover, and it was called The Sword Thief, and it had ninja stars all over the front, and I was like, "Good Lord!"
So
But
I didn't know that you could ask for something so specific. I've heard of, oh, my dad loved bluebirds, and when I was
yeah.
looking for a sign, the bluebird showed up. But I didn't know that you could actually ask for something fairly specific.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, because it's something that's meaningful to you. But also, I've asked for pink unicorns and things that would really stand out to me. And sometimes, of course, I'm a bit of a smart aleck at times. And so, if it's not good enough for me, if I'm in that frame of mind, then I'll ask for something more. And what it also does is it helps, in my humble assessment, it also helps establish your confidence and connection to the spirit realm of going, okay, now I'm seeing the signs. Now it's because sometimes we'll blow it off. Oh, that's because they were wearing, whatever T-shirt, or that's just because it's a pop-up ad on the computer, or whatever the case is, right? And
So
so,
sometimes a bluebird sitting in a tree is just a bluebird sitting in a tree, right?
right, it's like, well, it's summertime and the monarchs are migrating, right? And so I think our mind, it's a human condition that we want to place logic with events going on around us. And the thing is sometimes it just defies logic.
Yeah, that's for sure. Um, Changing gears just a little bit, what's the difference between haunting spirits and those that have crossed over and come back to visit?
Absolutely. Well, my understanding of, you think of a haunting spirit, right? And so I really use, some people use ghost and spirit. So to me, a ghost or a haunting spirit would be an entity that has not crossed over or is stuck in between or something like that. Now, there's a little bit difference. We could get into the nuances of what I consider a haunting spirit. Haunting spirit to me means that it's probably negative in origin, meaning that it's, always bugging you and, invoking fear, outside of being reassuring, like, oh, it's just grandma. But then there's also the whole, holy cow, that's grandma. Like she passed, like I was back, thinking when I first had my visitation. It kind of freaked me out, even though I
Yeah,
know it
that
was
can elicit,
grandma.
even though she was benevolent,
Yeah, right.
that
And
that can elicit a certain amount of fear, I would think.
well, absolutely. But I knew I was also reassured because I was like, oh, it's grandma. She's not here to hurt me. The other aspect is the souls that transition or cross over, as they say, into the realm of what we call heaven. And coming back for the communication aspect, because truly a soul energy, we all have, when somebody passes away, they have the option of whether to stay earthbound, whether to cross over, that we have a few, options if it were. And, so when they come back to communicate with their loved ones, that aspect of, they're picking up back their personalities. They're picking up their quirks and their craziness that made them them. Like crazy Uncle Carl, or a funny grandma, or I think about all the fun people in spirit, and even some that weren't so fun. They were crabby when they were living, and they're they come back as their crabby old self.
So
and
how can you tell the difference between somebody that's just putting their robes back on so that you recognize them, but they have crossed and are a reliable sense of information, from the ones that maybe they're presenting like they were when they were here, but they haven't crossed, and just because they're dead doesn't mean they're smart. So how do you figure out the difference between the two?
because I make one big distinction when it comes to that, is that I make a big intention that I only communicate with those that are, directly coming directly from heaven. And so that is not only my intention, but I set big boundaries around that. And so if somebody hasn't crossed over, quote unquote, um, I am not sitting there chatting them up. I'm not doing readings. I'm not doing, and the only time I work with them is if I'm helping them cross over, or, in the really nasty cases, which is a very super small percentage, is sometimes when we're talking about, we talk about the nasty poltergeists and, kind of the scary parts, right? So if we
Well,
think of
possessing spirits would
yeah,
fit in there, yes.
yeah, possessions, different things. So, which I've dealt with as well. But that is such a small percentage. But I don't, because their energy feels completely off. It's like telling the difference between a Dodge and a Chevrolet vehicle. You can clearly see the difference. The aspect of their energy is completely different. The souls that have not crossed over are just really heavy and different aspects. But and then that brings up the question too. It's like, okay, Dean, if people uh, pass by all kind of different means, does that mean that people that committed suicide, they don't cross over? And that's not the case. It doesn't matter how you died. They have the decision on the soul level of where they're headed. And
So when a person is, in the process of dying,
yes,
and of course there's a certain process we go through. In other words, we have to
yes.
back through our life in a way to collect ourselves as we cross over. Um, does fear play a part in some of these ones that choose, hey, not sure where I'm going, so I think I'm going to stay right here?
I believe that they do, and as well as the angels and archangels, which I connect to quite a bit, trying to pave the way for those people, saying, hey, we're here for you, trying to set up that, on the other side, their loved ones or people that they once knew are waiting for them. However, if that soul, if you think about somebody that a parent that crosses and they're like, I can't cross yet. I still got to take care of my children. Or what about my animals? What about my, the list goes on, right? Why we feel that our job here on Earth isn't done. We still have work to do, right? And so sometimes that's another reason that people they feel that unrest. There's like, oh, I got too much to do. You can't. It's not my time yet.
The closure isn't there. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, do you have spirits that show up to you that have not crossed that want a little help and tap on your door, basically?
Sometimes, we had a friend, later became a student of mine. Her mother passed actually in a tragic farm accident,
Mhm.
and it was a sad event. And but one day we were sitting here at our home, and the dog was growling at the door, and I was like, well, there's nobody at the door. I physically went and checked, and I was like, oh, there's nobody physically here, but I was like, I could feel a very faint energy signature, like a spirit. And I was like, okay. And I was like, that's interesting that spirit couldn't cross our threshold of our door. And I was like, because I made that intention.
Absolutely.
And
Well, it's
yeah,
that magic moment. We're going to have to take another station break. Please stay with us as Dean and I continue to explore Whispers from the Other Side. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
Brilliant feathers of an unearthly hue glide by on the edge of his dream. A whisper of touch, an unheard song. Whose bird takes flight, prompted by his broken heart.
To tell or not to tell? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Dean McMurray, his website, The Military Medium. com. Dean, sometimes I understand, and if this is the case with you, let us know, that a spirit will be wanting to talk to their surviving relatives, and they'll come to a medium first. How do you know if it's yours to do, yours to tell this person? I mean, you just walk up out of this blue and say, "Oh, by the way, your husband is talking to me." How do you do that? What do you do with that?
And that's a great question because I think so many people, see things on TV or hear things, and where do you draw the line, right? So yeah, that has happened to me, and I was at a restaurant picking up takeout and for my family one time, and there was a deceased gentleman clearly following the bartender, and and I was like, oh, that's totally his father. But I didn't go, excuse me, sir. Do you, I'm a medium, and do you know what that is? What I always do, and what I always do is I always put it back on spirit and saying, hey, I recognize and validate that, your presence. I see you there. But what I also do is, hey, if I'm supposed to deliver your message today, why don't you put those wheels in motion? And so where, maybe they'll strike up a conversation. That's happened before as well. When I put it back on spirit, somebody goes, hey, so what do you do for a living? Kind of start up a conversation, and then, by the way, after the aspect. But so I just don't go up to people, I guess, long story short, I just don't go up to people and go, excuse me, but you have a deceased loved one with you and they want you to know this. That's not how I work. And one of the reasons I think it's the way that I was raised as a child, just about, boundaries and everything and ethics, but also the way I was raised spiritually. And because I personally believe that it's a spiritual violation just to go up and start reading somebody. Certainly wouldn't want that, somebody else to do that to me.
Right. And when is it your feeling that people should, when they're teaching mediumship,
Yeah.
should also have an ethics class, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question because, when I was developing my mediumship class, I was like, I only found a few mediums out there or other teachers that either, like, I guess, putting it out there as far as what their ethics were. And so, yeah, absolutely. I completely believe that if somebody is doing work for others, there should be a level of ethics, just like you said, is doing a brief ethics class.
Because I've seen that so many times that someone's really, really gifted. I mean, I've seen some people that are
Yeah,
hugely gifted, and they're getting this information all the time. They don't know how to control it, but
yeah.
they also don't know when to tell and when not to tell. So that goes back to training, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and I think too, in some circumstances, you also have to go with, I'll always say you have to go with your intuition, but there could be a way that you do it ethically. You could go up to somebody and say, you can be very upfront and say, I'm a psychic medium, and this is what a medium is. Um, you know, I was inadvertently getting a message that they just kind of stepped into it, not like meaning to read you, but they just noticed this. Are you open to receiving a message? You could do it that way. However, a lot of people, I mean, I get it when a lot of people see it on TV, it's very, people that are receiving it are very open. However, I know there's a lot of people that be like, no, get away from me, so
Exactly.
because there's some people that are open to it and some people aren't. And, loving everybody and respecting everybody wherever they are.
It's so important. So, Dean, it's about that time in the show, and I get to ask you, what's your mission?
My mission is to help others heal one connection at a time.
That's a beautiful mission, Dean. So if you're working with someone that's crossed over, how and how do you know that they're legit? I mean, we talked about this before, but I think
Hmm.
it's a huge problem. How do
Yes.
you know the information you can trust from the information that's just their opinion?
Well, first and foremost, that you first, the validation aspect of when you're working with a spirit that's crossed over, and then their loved one that's, your client that you're getting this message for. They'll validate the information that you're receiving. Sometimes it can just seem so crazy, the information that you'll get. But again, remembering that, the message is not for the medium; it's for the client.
Right.
And so to remind yourself that you are just the vessel. I always like to say we're all a vessel, regardless of what you do each and every day. It's just, what are you putting, how are you filtering the message, or are you filtering the message? Are you listening to your intuition? Are you listening to spirit? But again, going back to how can you validate it? Validation from the client, but also intuitively, how does it feel? And then also, if you're information for yourself, or if it's just messages for the medium, write that stuff down and let it kind of guide you. And, you know, we got to understand that spirit and our intuition have a 30,000-foot view on the world and everything coming up. And so a lot of times when, people get hits on their intuition or spirit talking about things coming up, people are like, no, that's wrong because it didn't come true. Well, maybe 6 months from now it might. And of course, everything's in motion in the future. However, talking about spirit can see the bigger picture.
And
Um,
also, isn't there the possibility that because the person suddenly got this information, they've changed something in their lives that would have led to that outcome, and that outcome doesn't come?
yes, a
Yeah,
100%. And that's why the future is always ever unfolding.
absolutely it is. And that there's the adventure, right?
Absolutely.
So, do you have a way that you prepare your clients? I mean, I know that spiritual information, because they have such a huge overview, can be somewhat metaphorical as well as literal. And,
Yes.
working with spirit is totally different than just sitting down and talking to a person. Do you have a way of coaching your clients so that they know how to take the information?
One of the things that I found over the years is that I have found the best way for them to take the information is at face value. I always say that even if it doesn't validate now, I trust that it always will. And so I deliver it as I receive it in the original packaging, just like you're returning something to a big box store, keep it in the original packaging, no alterations, no substitutions. Because what I found is when we try to filter things, when we try to understand it and unwrap it in a way that makes sense in our logic, then we lose the meaning of what it was determined. So it could, just like you said, it could be figuratively, it could be, but typically if it's something symbolic, usually I feel like a different energy with it. And then they'll let me know it's more symbolic. Like, hey, they're showing me this, maybe, a flower. For example, one time there was spirit showed me a rose, and I said it's connected to a name. So it was symbolic of a name, somebody named Rose. Well, okay. So, these things, when it comes like that, of like, oh, I knew somebody named Rose, and quite honestly, she loved roses. Well, there you go. That
There
fits
you have it.
both bills. So,
So, if you're looking to find a psychic medium, and unfortunately, there's a lot of half-cocked, untrained people out there hanging their shingles, how can you find a good one?
well, I would say is word of mouth is probably the best friend, and especially with social media now, right? I mean, or Google, but first off, I would say is look in your local areas. If there's a holistic fair or if there is some of these psychic fairs, but also word of mouth. Ask your friends, ask social media, go to their websites, go to their YouTube pages, whatever. And number one, see if you connect energetically, and number two, look at the reviews. Not all of us will get great reviews, and you can't please everybody, and but also how long they've been in business, but also somebody that's just starting off as a medium. Doesn't mean that they're bad. They could just be very young in the business, so to speak. So you got to kind of discern for yourself. But I would say is ask around. Try to, even if you don't, live in that area and say you're going to connect, via Zoom or Skype or whatever you're using, ask people saying, hey, do you know anything about this guy or gal or whomever?
So basically, what are people saying?
What are
And
people saying?
that's the way people had to figure it out in the indigenous days even. Dean, unfortunately, we are totally out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Been a real pleasure. Our guest this hour has been Dean McMurray, the military medium. Dean is an internationally acclaimed psychic medium, healer, dowser, and ordained minister. To find out more about Dean and all he has to offer, visit his website, themilitarymedium.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, visit our website, www.missionevolution.org. But please, be sure to join us right here next time. This mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.
So above my broken life, bring your healing tears to me. Fly high, sweet phoenix, let your flame burn ever